Good morning. Can everyone hear me back there? All right, way in the back. Welcome. We're going to be jumping in and starting our community budget forum. I'd like to take a moment to welcome and thank you all for attending the first budget forum. This is put on by the League of Women Voters and Windsor CT Votes, and we have our guests today, Peter Souza, Craig Cooke from the school, and Peter Souza from the town. We're going to take a moment, go over the rules, and we really want your questions. This is your forum. So the point here is for you to ask some questions as we go through. Ideally, we're going to have a two-way interaction with the group, but to start us off, we're going to allow Dr. Cooke to do a presentation to give us a quick summary. We'll turn it over to Mr. Souza to give a quick summary, and then we'll open it up to questions. Couple things, there's some information being passed around you can take a look at as they go through their summaries, the latest and greatest right off the press. My name is Steve, and I'll be moderating today, and basically what I'm going to do is ask you for questions. I'm going to make sure we can hear them. We're going to hand them off to the correct person depending on the question. We're going to allow about a minute per question, so we want to be sure everyone has a chance, an opportunity to ask a question, and then we'll open it up to round two of questions. We do have a timer somewhere to help us keep time. We also have somebody walking around. Marilyn, you're our microphone person. Marilyn will be walking around with a microphone to make sure that we can be heard. This is also on Win TV. It's being recorded, so we want to make sure people who aren't able to join us will be able to listen to the questions. I may have to repeat some if we're not using the microphone. And I think that's it in terms of questions going forward. Very simple. We want to be respectful. We want to give everyone an opportunity and just make sure that we give people time to ask their question. So I think that's it. We're going to jump right in. I want to respect everyone's time here. Get back to your activities. I'm going to open it up, give it to Dr. Cooke, and he's going to give his opening presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, and welcome. Thank you for coming out again. I see lots of familiar faces. Everything I will share is on the two documents from Windsor Public Schools that was passed out to you. They look like these two documents here. So everything we share is there, and they're also the information's available on our website. So feel free to access that, or even shoot us an email after today if you have any questions. So the Windsor Public Schools budget this year, the increase is proposed at 2.67% for next year. That comes off of a 5-year average increase of 1.73%, and that has been steadily below state average. So we have been, really trying to be conservative with our budget request and doing a lot of work ahead of time. One of the things that I shared with my staff as we presented and prepared the budget this year was that I expected that any increase would be tried to be offset by a similar decrease or a decrease in another account. And so our principals and schools really looked at things that they could discontinue if they were looking to continue something else. Just a note, our enrollment continues to increase. We're one of the few school districts in Connecticut that has increasing enrollment, and so we are, as of today, over 3,300 students. You'll see on the paperwork we provided that on October 1 we are at 3,269 students, and so those numbers do typically go up during the school year, but we use October 1 because that's the official enrollment report from the state. That's the official date for the enrollment that they figure out our funding and utilize for our student counts. As part of the school budget, there are revenues that come into the town to help offset our school budget, and those are an education cost sharing grant, which is the biggest one of $11.5 million. We do receive about $1.5 million of special education reimbursement for our costs for special education students, and then there's also an alliance grant and some other smaller grants that total about $900,000 to help offset those funds, and those grants go to go to the town. As I mentioned, as we looked at our needs with our students and keep moving the district forward, we had some additions that were offset by reductions. We are looking at a reading and math support teacher at Sage Park Middle School, a technology technician throughout the district, mostly at Windsor High School due to just a number of devices and technology needs throughout the district. We have the need for another special ed teacher at Windsor High School, and then we're also looking at making financial literacy a requirement for all students to graduate from Windsor High School. And so that's really something that we've heard from families, from students. The town does some excellent programs, well attended by our students, and one of the things we do on a yearly basis is talk to students and see what courses they want, and they actually ask for this to be a requirement as well as something we've identified as a need for students who are going off to college or the workforce and bombarded with lots of financial issues, and I think this will be very beneficial to them and their path after Windsor High School. Speech language pathologist at the elementary level is needed based on caseloads. We're looking to add math tutors and support for students who are on behavior plans as well from another staff member. We are looking to expand our summer school program, which has been changing over the years. We've gone from from a program that used to bring students into the schools for about 4 to 5 weeks during the summer to a program where we're working directly with families and students either in their homes or at the library, and kind of tracking their performance on reading and math during the summer, giving them more options and not restricting just to 4 to 5 weeks. We also are looking to add major maintenance money. I have a major maintenance account that we use in our schools to paint the interior of the buildings, to replace floor tile, things like that are under our purview. It's about half of what it was over 10 years ago, and so we've had some reductions to that account over the years. We do have aging buildings, but we have buildings that are in very, very good shape, but there's projects every year that we have to defer, and we're looking to invest more in those buildings. We have reduced 3 positions to help offset those increases that I've just shared, and also decreased several accounts to offset those positions. As with all budgets, as we developed the budget, we had several challenges. Almost $1 million would go towards meeting our contractual obligations. So each year as we move things forward, we have almost $1 million that would go towards employee cost. Our school transportation, as you can imagine, goes up each year as well. We have a newer fleet of buses through our transportation provider, but we have increases in those contractual obligations. And then an increase, but something we've worked really hard on is keeping special education students in Windsor, and so we've had a very small increase in our special education tuition account proposed for next year. That's always something we don't know of what's going to happen until it happens, but that's $50,000 for next year. Some savings that I'm proud of. I'm certainly proud of the fact that in the past that special ed tuition account was $200,000 to $300,000 increase on a typical year, and so we've worked hard to keep that down. We have no increase for magnet schools tuition for students leaving Windsor because the reduced number of students that are choosing magnet schools over Windsor public schools. We have, for the 3rd year in a row, just a really good success story with our health insurance account. So it's 0% for the 3rd year in a row increase. We've made changes in the insurance plans with our staff and have had really good experience in terms of claims, and so we're very pleased. We've also made some upgrades to our buildings in terms of LED lights that have saved us a pretty significant amount of money on electricity. All of Windsor High School is going through that, and it's a pretty big building, so to have LED lights in there have really shown some savings, as well as a phone system that's gone to basically a wireless phone system. So that's saved us a lot of money. We continue to have a very strong graduation rate, so on the plus side. This budget continues to fund SAT preparation, so all our juniors take the SAT test, and that's our major measure for the high school, as well as many of our students are taking advanced placement exams, which is basically an exam at the end of a college level type course. And so we've returned just this year additional preparation for students taking those courses. I'm really excited about an agreement that we were in the process of finalizing with Goodwin College, where Windsor High School students would receive college credit for work at Windsor High School and go on for a manufacturing program at Goodwin College. It's one of the biggest needs, if not the biggest needs, for employers in Connecticut. It's a growing industry for Connecticut, and this program will put our students about 18 months ahead, potentially, if they take all the right courses at Windsor High School of outside students. And Goodwin College was so impressed with the program at Windsor High School that they're actually granting credits for classes students would take at Windsor High School. As I mentioned, we have pretty healthy increase in enrollment going on. We had to add, in the start of this school year, 2 kindergarten teachers. As kindergarten enrollment came through, we saw such an increase, and it happened to be mostly at Pequannock School, that we had to add 2 kindergarten teachers to Pequannock School. So that's really an exciting problem to have. We're really pleased to see that. As well, we had a preschool special education enrollment increase that required us to add a teacher to Oliver Ellsworth. We made other reductions to offset those increases. And then just as a final note in terms of enrollment, and for my notes today, we are expected to see a 7% increase in student population over the next 10 years. So the increase is expected to continue. Last time I've seen a stat from the state, about 85% of school districts in Connecticut see a decrease year over year, and that's typically what I'm seeing from colleagues in the Hartford area as well. But we're continuing to see an increase at a pretty manageable rate. It's not a huge increase year over year, other than the Pequannock kindergarten that is causing us major issues, but it does help to push costs up. So those were my comments today.
Great, thank you. It was very succinct. Now, in the meantime, while you're thinking a moment, Peter speaking, think about your questions for our superintendent, because he's going to be ready to answer them, and I want you to have some good questions ready. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Good morning, folks. How are you? Thanks for coming out on this beautiful spring day. I'm going to touch a little bit on the overall budget that the town council adopted last evening, which will go to the voters on Tuesday, May 14th. And so at that point, you'll have an opportunity to vote on the overall budget. Before I get into the specifics of the budget, I just want to touch a little bit on where we stand today as an overall community and your local government. We really have a solid foundation upon which we're building, and this is really a credit to the community for all the decades of stewardship that many of you have participated in building over the years. We have a really strong local economy that's diverse in Windsor. There's over 26,000 jobs in the town of Windsor. Windsor only has 29,000 residents, and we have just over 26,000 jobs in town. So we are an importer, if you will, of jobs. And that's great. That gives a great opportunity for our young folks to return to town, to stay in town. Superintendent Cooke mentioned the program that they've established with Goodwin College in the area of manufacturing. And of those roughly 26,000 jobs, over 3,500 of those are in advanced manufacturing. So there are opportunities here in town for to both recruit and bring new residents to town, but also for our young folks to be able to be gainfully employed. Just in manufacturing, we have jobs, as you know, all across the spectrum. So that's a solid foundation. We have a diverse tax base. About 45% of our grand list, our taxable grand list, is non-residential. So it's all those businesses in Day Hill Road, International Drive, Town Center, down in Wilson are all contributing to our tax base and to help provide those revenues for the services that the community desires. We have maintained our AAA credit rating, which is the highest credit rating that we're able to obtain, and that helps us get lower interest rates on the funds that we need to borrow for capital reinvestment in our buildings and our infrastructure. We have appropriate reserve funds, the so-called rainy day funds, that we have, and that helps us be able to weather some different as the economy may bounce up and down. We have those reserve funds in place to help weather some of those more difficult times. The budget that is presented to you folks on May 14th, that was adopted by the council last night, maintains the service levels that you're accustomed to. In some ways, it has some small enhancements to those, and it also continues to the reinvestment in our infrastructure, our roads, our buildings, our parks and grounds facilities. For example, this current fiscal year that we're in now, last summer we repaved over 6 miles of roadways in town. That sounds like it's a lot, but we have 149 miles of roads in town that we're responsible for, and that does not include the state roads. Doesn't include Park Ave, doesn't include Windsor Ave, Pequannock Ave. So this budget maintains that ability to reinvest in that infrastructure that is aging. There's no doubt about it. We're a community that saw a lot of growth in the 1970s and 80s, and roads generally last about 20 to 25 years. And so we need to continue to make that reinvestment in those type of infrastructure. We have some major drivers that within the expense side of the budget this year that the town councils had to address. The governor has proposed to shift some of the cost for state teachers' retirement pensions onto local government. So the local governments in the state of Connecticut have never been required to contribute into the pension plan for teachers. And unfortunately, the state of Connecticut has made some choices over the years not to inadequately fund those long-term liabilities. And so the state is requesting and proposing that municipalities contribute a portion of towards a portion of those costs. For Windsor's case, it would, for the year number 1, which would be this upcoming fiscal year, there's a possibility of approximately $190,000 increase in the budget to go towards those long-term obligations. And those, under the governor's proposal, would increase over the next 2 to 3 years to approximately $600,000 a year. So that's a big question mark that's within this budget. The town council has included approximately $90,000 to go towards that potential expenditure of $200,000. And the reason the council took that approach was that there's a huge question mark with the state budget if that expense is going to be included in the upcoming budget or not. And so the council took kind of a middle-of-the-road approach, which I believe is financially prudent at this point in time. Some of the other cost drivers is our Metropolitan District Commission. There's an 8-member town body that we belong to for over the last 50 years. They provide sewer services to the town, and so that is going up approximately $240,000 over the current year's budget. Our police officers in town also participate in a statewide pension plan, and I'm happy to say that plan is pretty well funded. And unlike some of the other state administered programs, the local plan for police officers and other employees is well funded. Unfortunately, there's going to be an increase in that pension plan, so our required contribution is increasing as well. And so those are some of the main expense drivers, similar to The school side, our health insurance costs are pretty much level from one year to the next. And so we're fortunate to have had good claims experience over the last 2 or 3 years to allow us to almost level fund that as well. Some of the things that are within this proposed budget that the council adopted is that, as I mentioned, we'll continue to make our required contributions to the pension plans. We're continuing to set aside dollars for our long-term retiree health insurance obligations for our employees, both our retirees that have in recent years that have retired, as well as future retirees, those obligations. We have included a part-time position within the police department, and police department is dealing more and more with service calls, that emergency calls that deal with folks that have that are in mental health crisis. And so we had received a grant from the federal government over the last 2 years to have a part-time mental health clinician work alongside the police officers so that they could do follow-up work with those folks that are in crisis, and to be able to make sure they're getting connected with the services that they need, mental health services that they need. That's been found to be a very productive program, and so that grant has expired, and so the town council has included approximately $45,000 for a part-time individual to work with, to continue that work with the community and be located within the police department. We have had a slight increase in funding for replacement of our fleet and DPW equipment. And so it's a slight increase of $30,000, but again, that helps us maintain our fleet of various public works equipment that's needed throughout town. There's a small amount of money allocated, new money allocated to Northwest Park for some land management activities to make sure that the park is being maintained well, not only for us human patrons, but also for the wildlife that is at the park. And so that's a relatively small amount of money, but as you know, Northwest Park is what I like to say one of the jewels in our crown, and it's our crown jewel, and so we need to make sure that the park is in good condition as well. And so the programs, we also maintain our programs here at the Senior Center, as well as the Caring Connection, which is our program for seniors who are with dementia or Alzheimer's, and so the council has maintained funding for that program as well in the proposed budget. So this overall, the budget tax impact is a 1.9% impact related to the budget. And I'm going to get a little bit into details here, and hopefully I can explain it briefly. As you know, this year is a property revaluation year, so all the properties in town have been reassessed and reappraised. And that's mandated by the state of Connecticut. Every 5 years, every community in the state needs to do that. And so we have done that. And so each community or property in the community is going to be impacted uniquely, because each property changed value in its own way based upon the housing style it was, the neighborhood, and the sales comparisons within the town. And so it's going to be unique. And so when I talk about 1.9% tax increase, that's due to the budget, the changes in expenditures, and the changes in revenues. But you may see your home value or tax value may be a 3.5%, for example, and that's because of the change in your property valuation. And so I'd encourage all of you to go onto the town's website, and we have a tax calculator. We have a tax calculator, and it's highlighted on this sheet that was have at the bottom is an example of what that tax calculator looks at. So you can put in your number if you were, you live at 10 Maple Avenue. You can put in your address, and you'll be able to see how this budget will change your taxes. partly due to revaluation and partly due to the budget itself, the expenditure and revenue part. So you'll be able to see exactly how much your taxes will increase year over year. And so it's a little bit more complicated this year than it had been the last 4 years that Craig and I have spoken with you. But it is a 1.9% increase. And I want to emphasize that over the last 10 years, we look back 10 years, the average increase in property tax has been less than 2%. And so the town council has been very cognizant of the tax rate, and they've been working hard to maintain services, reinvest in our community, and try to mitigate the overall tax impact to our residents. So Steve, I'm going to stop at this point, and Craig and I would love to take questions, particularly Craig.
All right, thank you. So if you hold that thought for a minute, we have a microphone on its way. Thank you, Marilyn. And the reason is we want to make sure that we can hear the question.
Good morning.
We need that new technical person from the high school to help us.
Is that on?
Excellent.
Good morning.
Good morning.
A little too loud now. I have two questions for Superintendent Cooke. The first one concerns the unfortunate death of the Windsor High School student that we read about this morning. How does his death and transfers of when families leave Windsor, they go somewhere else, how does that affect the graduation rate, or doesn't?
So I'll deal with the second part of that first. So if a student leaves Windsor High School and goes to another high school, in-state or out-of-state, and we know where he or she is going, then that is not negatively impact our graduation rate. So we send the student records. We notify the state that a student moved from Windsor to South Windsor, and so that student then becomes part of the South Windsor number of students, and it does not impact either way our graduation rate. In terms of the recent case, I can't tell you how that would impact positive or negative. The one student, I'm not sure.
Okay. Thank you. The second question involves school busing. Is it really necessary for the school buses to stop at every house and let students on or off? That seems to be a waste of gas, a waste of time, ties up traffic. Can't there be one bus stop on a route where the students would congregate and then get picked up at one time?
Sure. So good question. We look at that every year. We try and re-identify bus stops and work through that. We have students with special cases where they need to be picked up. Obviously, younger students, there's going to be more stops than middle school and high school students. We do try and congregate. We have I think a reasonable boundary around schools where we don't provide transportation. So we have a number of walkers, but we have to look at everything in terms of how much traffic is on the street, whether there are sidewalks for the student. But that is a concern I hear from time to time, is that there seems to be more bus stops than I think when we were all growing up, that there is more of that. And so, like I said, we try and identify the real cost for us is the entire bus route. Gas is obviously expensive, and that's a big function of that. But on a typical cost, it's about $45,000 for a bus to be operating for all the school days for the entire school year. So where we save money is when we're able to find an entire bus route we can eliminate for all three runs, high school, middle school, and elementary, and everything is is typically built off of the elementary runs, and so that's where we have the most amount of transportation that has to occur. So when we start with that and have 40 bus runs at elementary level, we typically try and have about 40 for the middle and high, because then that allows us to clear those bus runs faster and get all the students home faster. So it is something I'd tell you we look at every year. A big function of the increase, for the contract now is increased employee cost, and so there's a 4% unemployment. There's a big drive for bus drivers for the state routes, for other bus routes and other transportation routes, and we can only offer through our provider, basically a 10-month work year, and so each year we have bus drivers pulled to other pieces, and I think that the cost for health insurance and salary continues to rise for bus drivers, and I think that's a big piece of that increase.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? That's what we like.
My question's about the construction on Day Hill Road for Great Pond, and so therefore it's more for the next budget cycle and not this one. Peter, do you have an idea of what the grand list growth will be because of that? And then two, because there's the Great Pond District, I think you do a 50-50 sharing of costs. Can you tell us what costs the town doesn't keep and what the district absorbs? And for Craig, I guess town staff tells me they don't anticipate much growth in enrollment, even though they're going to be over 250 apartment units there. Do you agree with that?
All right. Take it away.
Craig, yours is much shorter than mine, so I'll let you go first.
Thanks, Peter. So I'll go slow to give you time to make those calculations. So it's hard. It's a hard question to answer. We have not seen much growth in students coming out of the apartments behind Town Hall. So I could start with that. So we know that is the case. But I think one of the conversations Mr. Souza and I have from time to time when we follow from other school districts is many times as apartments turn over, there are sometimes families that come in. So I can think of several districts who have seen condos move from maybe not producing as many students for their school district or apartments to producing quite a few. Rocky Hill is one district that I know has seen growth from students coming out of condos in an apartment. South Windsor is also in that scenario. So I think there's a potential down the road, but I would agree with town staff that I think at this point, based on our previous experience with places in town, that we have not seen a tremendous number of students come out of those buildings, but it could be something that near in the future we have seen growth through the demographer's report, and anecdotally I think as housing stock has turned over, we're seeing neighborhoods that we had not had more than say 2 or 3 students coming out of. Now we're in the 12 range. Principals of our 2 elementary schools have shared as they've seen families come in and register and have a kindergarten student for the first time. They see other children in tow and in carriages and being held, and so they're seeing that they're predicting that they're going to have more and more students enrollment from that, and that was also consistent with the demographer's report. Whereas in the past, 70% of the births in town, that children that were born when their families were living in Windsor came to Windsor Public Schools, we're seeing about 80%. So that's a pretty significant change in number for us as we're seeing. I think that's a big part of that kindergarten enrollment. But in terms of the new buildings in town, like I said, the apartments behind Town Hall have not seen a great number of students come out of there, but we'll continue to monitor that as we go forward.
Thanks, Craig, for letting me do a few quick calculations here. I just want to touch a little bit on Dr. Cooke's comments. one of the big factors with the construction of the new residential units is the size of the units, how many bedrooms there are in a unit. And so, for example, the units behind Town Hall in that beautiful Windsor Station complex, those are predominantly one bedroom in studios. And so you're not going to get a larger household. You might get, household that's there, maybe relocating. They may have a child there on a temporary basis while they relocate and find a more permanent place here in town or in the region. Great Pond Village is going to be mainly 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms. And so that's one of the reasons why we don't expect to see a significant number of new school-age children living there. And we work very closely with the developer to try to encourage them to build 1 and 2 bedroom units, just to have that balance. And there is a larger idea behind allowing and trying to promote some multifamily housing in town. Prior to the apartments on Mechanic Street being built 3 or 4 years ago, Windsor had not seen a new apartment or multifamily complex built in over 35 years. And our estimation was if we're gonna continue to grow as a community, not necessarily build a bunch of brand new houses, but we're gonna backfill the houses that are already here that have been built over the last 50 years, we need young families or households to be here. And as someone's relocating for one of those 3,500 jobs in manufacturing on Day Hill Road or the 26,000 jobs town-wide, they usually when they're entering the workforce, they're at an entry-level housing. And they may not be in a position where they know which town or community they want to live in, or they may not have that down payment for that home. And so if they get into a rental situation and hopefully they fall in love with our wonderful Windsor community, and when they get ready to purchase a home and put down a little more permanent roots, we've got them. And they're the ones that can go and buy that small bungalow in Windsor Center or that cape down in Deerfield and be able to get started, and they can be that next generation for our Windsor community, because we aren't all about bricks and mortar. I talk about our hard infrastructure, but really what we are is a community of people. And if we don't have folks regenerating and moving into town, then we're not our vitality gets impacted. So there is a bigger thought process and a longer term planning process in that entire, not only in town center, but also with the Great Pond Village, where we're basically taking the old combustion engineering campus at the end of Day Hill Road and really reconverting it into a completely new use with housing and other economic development activities. So, to Mr. Slate's question, the first phase that's under construction at Great Pond Village is approximately 230 units of housing. If you use approximately $3,500 per unit in taxes, in real estate taxes, that will generate, in round numbers, $800,000 a year in tax revenue. The agreement that we have with the property developer is that half of that revenue will be rebated back to the developer to help pay for the public infrastructure, the public roads, the sewers, the water lines that are to serve that development. And so that concept is called tax increment financing, and it's used fairly frequently across the country, and to be able to help incentivize development. And so we'll see over time as that development continues, and that's going to be a 15, 20 year time to build out that entire development. But this first phase, in a year from now, the budget's going to see an increase, and And part of that's going to be due to Great Pond Village, where we're going to retain approximately half of that $800,000 for our general services. That's going to pay for police, fire. Well, I should take back fire a little bit, because fire is still volunteer fire department in town, but they do have some basic expenses. But pay for our public safety. Some of those dollars can go to the senior services, school, education, but there will be approximately 50% of that revenue will go to the developer to help pay off the borrowing cost on the public infrastructure. I'm not sure if I caught all your pieces of your question or not, George.
All right, thank you. Other questions? Yep, Bernie? No. I have a poll in front of me, so I'll take your word for it. Oh, hold on, Bernie.
Yes, I have a question about the Plaza Theater and all the apartments above, and you have leased one restaurant that has been flipped a lot of times, and there's another restaurant across from CVS that has been up and down for for other reasons. But I wouldn't question all those issues about those buildings.
Thank you. Working with small property owners and small business owners is different than working with some large corporations. And so, speaking specifically to the Plaza building, as we affectionately know it here in town, that property is privately owned. That property owner has spent a significant amount of money on the interior of that building. He's renovated all of I believe there's 7 or 8 apartments on the second level, and so he's renovated all of those apartments. And when I say renovated, he's basically gutted those, right down to the studs, put in new plumbing, new electrical services, and new kitchens. And so he has not started to lease those yet. He has not put those for rent, and that's his own business decision. So the first floor of where those storefronts were, he's renovating that for a possible restaurant use. And so if you walk by there on maybe this afternoon on a nice afternoon walk, you'll be able to see the activity that in a lot of the construction work that has been done on the interior of those storefronts. The former theater space has also been completely renovated, and he plans on having that as an event space. So if you want to have a family get together, or perhaps we want to have a party for Dr. Cooke, we could have that party in that back plaza area, because it's going to be an event. He's taken out all the different seats, and so it's quite impressive. So he's still got a ways to go. There's no doubt, and we are waiting patiently for him to be able to get that building rented up and leased up. So there is a challenge. There's always that small business owners I love them to death. They're unique. They're independent. That's what makes it so exciting and so different. But that's the challenge at the same time, because they're all marching to their own drummer, if you will. And so, but the First Town Downtown organization, which is what we refer to as our Main Street program, they're actively working, trying to promote Town Center, trying to work with the business owners to be as successful as possible. So that's a little bit what's happening. The old I'm dating myself a little bit here. The old Dandelions restaurant, or 75 diner, that is being converted to a new use. A new restaurant he's renovating that property. He has not announced what his name is what the name of the restaurant's going to be, but that's going to be a new restaurant and then the what has been most recently known as Track 139 at the corner of Union Street and Palisado Avenue. That's also being renovated now for a future restaurant use as well. So there is some activities, and hopefully, as we get later into the summer and early fall, some of those places will be occupied.
All right, thank you. Bernie, I think you're up.
Bernie Simmons, thank you very much for being here this morning. I noticed, Dr. Cooke, that you said more students are choosing Windsor Public Schools. Are those students from Windsor or they're from out of town?
No, what I was referring to specifically when we were talking to that item was magnet school tuitions staying level or actually decreasing. So last year we had $50,000 savings to that account, which is tremendous for us because in years past, because they set the rate year to year after our budget is already certainly proposed, but typically set, that we were able to have savings in that was tremendous. But it's Windsor students that may have been attending Metropolitan Learning Center or a different magnet school for CREC where we're paying tuition have come back to us, whether it's at a grade level change, so as they're going from 8th to 9th grade they come back, or just transferring in mid-year. A lot of times that's one of the implications of our change from October 1 to now is magnet school students coming back mid-year, or just not going out. So we'll have a 12th grader graduate, and then a smaller number are going out in 5th grade or 8th grade, as that happens.
And I was going to ask the town manager, the gentleman who just preceded me, he pretty well touched on the question that I have, but I was then just asking, what is the town council or the town manager doing to help get some exciting things going on downtown? Anything I want to do, whether it's going to a restaurant or seeing some entertainment, I'm going somewhere else. And is there something that could put a fire under those people who own some of those buildings and get them to have some entertainment or something downtown? The restaurants all serve breakfast and lunch, but they're all closing at dinner time. And some of us like to be awake after, 6 o'clock. And it would be nice if we could just take a short trip instead of going all the way to Manchester or Enfield.
How well do you sing, Bernie? Maybe we can get a little entertainment going.
You wouldn't want to hear me.
That is that challenge, and I think that there's we're attempting to work collaboratively with those property owners. Part of it is the marketplace, and part of it is that is it kind of the chicken and the egg, and trying to encourage folks to make that it's a risk, to make that investment risk, and to be able to be on that cutting edge. And someone always needs to go first. As a kid, when you go, when going to jump in the pool or in the pond, who's going to jump first? And so it's kind of one of that same dynamic in some respects. And so we do have we have a stronger town center now with the apartments on Mechanic Street. And so we're seeing those residents that are living in the Windsor Station apartments, they are starting to patronize the businesses. And I would encourage folks to contact either the individual business owners or First Town Downtown to make those suggestions and say, this is what we'd like to see. It's really hard for the town to incentivize at that small level. It's a challenge. We have done some things in the past where we've offered some low interest loans to those property owners so that they might be able to improve their building facade and to keep the appearance up. But in terms of the uses of those spaces, it's a challenge. We do have a program in town that if you own a commercial building that's 40 years old or older, and you improve the assessed value by doing improvements to the building, if you increase assessed value by, I believe it's 10%, that tax impact due to the increased value can be reduced over a 7-year period. And so we do have some small incentives. So if someone wanted to come in and renovate a building to expand so they could have a different type of entertainment, then they might be possible for a small tax and break over a course of a 7-year period. But those are pretty incremental things that we can do. The best thing to do is everyone to continue to shop and visit and patronize the businesses. And while you're there, throw a few ideas out there. Maybe one of these entrepreneurs will take you up on that. So.
Thanks, Bernie. All this talk about food, everyone's getting close to party time. All right, another question. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Tracy. I'm a citizen, resident, taxpayer, and I bought my final home here in Windsor. I love Windsor. I love what you guys are doing. I really appreciate what Dr. Cooke's doing with the schools. Peter, I'm really impressed. And I'm actually, supporting the budget. And I'm on the group that, Windsor Matters, to really support passing the budget. And I was really pleased that we have a 9-0 for the town, for the board, 9-0 for the town, saying we support this budget. So I'm wondering why every year, we have these referendums, that we don't really believe that our representatives are doing what's in our best interest, and we have to vote again. I know that's maybe a historical thing, but somehow down the line, I'd like to see us change that and maybe only have a referendum if the taxpayers come up and say, whoa, we want to, have a referendum, and not automatically have a referendum. And I don't know what we're thinking about that down the road, but I also think because when we have a 9-0 or 9-0, could we bring our parties together to support this budget together? And what are we doing to really make sure that everybody is supporting this budget?
Those are excellent points. Thank you very much. To the point of referendum, the town's charter, which is basically our bylaws that govern the town operations and governance, requires an annual referendum. And so that would, under state law, there is a process that a town's charter can be amended, and that takes, the first step is, it takes at least 6 of the 9 council members to vote to create a charter commission. And so in recent years, there has not been much discussion regarding changing the referendum. I would say probably the years blend together now, but I would say probably 10 to 12 years ago, there was some talk about that amongst council members, but in recent years, there has not been. In terms of what Dr. Cooke and I can do relative to getting the vote out, that's not, to be quite frank with you, that is not our job as professional managers. We are here doing activities like this, and we're very happy to do activities as sponsored by the League of Women Voters to be able to promote the information and to allow folks to be informed to be able to make a good choice as they see fit. It's really the community and then groups within the community that need to come together and either, whichever way they would like to present the budget, they're the need to advocate whichever way they feel for the budget. So we've, just as a side note, Dr. Cooke and I and a few members of our team, collective teams, meet once a month, and we discuss communication. We discuss this items such as this budget in brief that we put together to make sure that we have the good information that's going out to the full community. And how do we put that out through forums like this, through online activities, through one-on-one meetings, and using avenues such as Win TV and our town local government channel as well. So it is a challenge. We're in a time that information overload, in my estimation, and we're just getting bombarded. All of us are getting bombarded with information, and so we're doing our best. And I believe that there's folks in the community that are also doing their best to try to advocate whichever their position is for or against the budget. So.
All right, thank you. We have time for one more question. Two more questions. One in the back, one in the front. All right, thank you.
Good morning. Thank you all for coming. My name is Janice Walker. I'm sure some of you at the table remember me. My question is in regards to an area town that is developing somewhat, but near the Wilson area. And as you know, the Price Right has currently done a major rehab. A lot of more people coming into town to that store now. And there are a couple businesses that have been there for quite some time that, for years now, that are still vacant. And I was just wondering, in order to continue the development of what Price Right has started, has there been any conversations with any business people about coming to that area? Because like I said, there are a couple of vacancies that's been there for years that could further develop that area and make our town even more better.
There has been a variety of conversations with the property owners, not only at the shopping center, but also at some of the properties along Windsor Avenue. And one development that will be interesting to see how it plays out is that under the new tax law that was passed roughly 2 years ago now, or 18 months ago, they're talking about you may have heard talk about what's called opportunity zones. And opportunity zones is a federal program that does not involve any cash outlay, but what it promotes is reinvestment in certain areas of a community, and those folks who are reinvesting in those areas get tax credits. And so the Wilson neighborhood, if you will, and this doesn't go quite as far as the Windsor Shopping Center, but basically south of 218 is within that designated opportunity zone. And so there's that so what we're doing is trying to promote with various businesses and investors that there's opportunities there to be able to get tax credits, not necessarily local tax credits or incentives, but on their federal taxes. And so that's a little bit slow in developing nationwide because we're still waiting really for that program to be rolled out by the Treasury and the IRS. And so, but we continue to have conversations. The Chamber, as a matter of fact, the Chamber of Commerce, the new Chamber of Commerce Director, Adam Gutchin, has made it a high point for his next few months to reach out to all the businesses in the Wilson area to get a sense of where they are, where they might be going with their businesses. So again, it's similar to the town center. It's a challenge, but we have we continue to outreach in a variety of ways.
All right, thank you. We have a question up front, Marilyn. You getting your exercise in today? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Andrea, and I've lived here for 26 years, and I have been to these meetings many times, and my question to the budget, not to the economy, but the budget, it seems like you have mentioned, Mr. Cooke, that there is money that we didn't use for, going to those other schools. And we also have things that don't get done, from year to year. I go to all the meetings and I hear about these things because those are good things. We didn't use this, we didn't use that. Like this one that's going to be the $90,000 to the retirement fund. I believe you should think about that, and you do have a very good way of presenting this stuff. But when this money is not used, it seems like every time we get to vote on it, it's because you've raised something and we have money had been set aside for something else, but it never shows that it's going anywhere else. It's just, oh, well, that's extra. We'll just use it. So what I'm trying to find out is the 100%, 90,000, which is understandable. What kind of fund, just like in the government, the state government, they take the money and then it goes to a general fund. Where is this? How is this going to be proven that it's not going to just go to someplace else? It should be used for what it's supposed to be used for.
I believe you're speaking to the state teachers' retirement category. And as proposed by the governor, those dollars that municipalities would need to pay into that pension plan for the teachers would go directly into the teachers' retirement fund. So the towns would transfer, in this case, if we are required to pay $90,000, those funds would be remitted to the state of Connecticut and they would go directly into the teachers' retirement pension fund.
Even if they don't, if that isn't proposed and it doesn't end up being.
Okay, if it does not end up being that way, then those dollars will not be sent to the state.
Right, so
And
we have them.
absolutely, I'm going to answer your question.
No, yeah.
I'm going to answer that. So we have those dollars, then the town council has alternatives. Town council can put that into what is called the general fund reserve account.
Again, yeah.
And let me talk a little bit about that. We have a best practice within not only municipal government, but also state government to have reserve funds on hand. And those reserve funds do two things. They provide financial stability. We have obligations that, for example, for borrowing, that can last anywhere from 10 years to 20 years, similar to your mortgages. And so to make sure that we're credit worthy, the folks who are buying those bonds look to see how stable we are. And one of those metrics that they use, one of those measures they use, is how liquid are you? What kind of liquidity do you have? And so that is our general fund reserve. So if we have 5 businesses in town, all of a sudden over 3 or 4 years, close down because the economy's gone into the tank again, that impacts our ability to raise taxes and so in the short term, those credit those folks that are buying our bonds want to know that we have some way to pay back those legal obligations that we have. And so that's why we have between 15 and 20% of our operating budget set aside in a reserve fund. If you remember back in 2011 when we had that quirky Halloween storm where everyone in town and statewide lost power. So what we did, our neighbor to the east of us ended up borrowing my recollection is over $2 million, borrowed money for $2 million to do their cleanup. Your town council was able to use monies from our reserve fund, and we used over $1.5 million of our reserve fund. We didn't have to borrow a dime to pay for that cleanup. And we were fortunate enough to be able to receive some reimbursement from the federal government through FEMA. So there are needs that are unexpected. There's needs that meet our financial best practices. But we do use that. Every year, the town council, including 2020 budget year, the town council sets aside $900,000 from that reserve fund to mitigate the mill rate. Now, if a revenue source comes in a little bit higher than expected, or perhaps there's expenditures that aren't as high as we expected, That difference goes to replenish that $900,000 that the council used out of the reserve fund. And so we do, and in the proposed budget, we have to replace a underground fuel tank. I want to get down into the nitty gritty. There's an underground fuel tank that every, I believe it's 30 years, need to be replaced by state law. And so what I'm proposing is that we use $100,000 of that reserve fund to replace that underground fuel tank so that we don't have to raise new money or borrow money to do that. So we try to use it prudently and conservatively, try to meet all those different examples that I mentioned.
All right, thank you. One more question. Who would like to ask the final question of the day? Anybody? Well, someone who hasn't asked a question yet. Yes, sir. Oh, you want a part two? All right, we'll see if we can keep everyone here.
This is following, Richard Armstrong, resident. This is following up on the display and the discussion of the last person. I think it would be better for you to present this year's or the proposed budget by inserting a column which would say that this is the 2019 actual expenses expected rather than the adopted budget versus proposed budget, and that would show your reserve fund fluctuating, and it would also show where you're saving money from, and I'm hoping that you do that. Basically, it's each month you meet and review the spending to budget for 6, 7, 8, 9 each month, and then you propose what you're going to be spending for the rest of the year, and with that you compare that to the full year budget. It would be easier for people to understand what's going on with it, comparing it to an actual budget. That's nice, but if you compared that to the current forecast for the year 2019, it would eliminate questions as where we're saving money and where we're spending money.
Okay, is there a question there or just a comment?
That's just a comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we need to take a question, more of a forum for questions. Any other questions? Part B? All right, yes.
Hi, Joyce Armstrong, live in Walden Woods, been here 23 years. If the minimum wage goes up in Connecticut, does that impact the town of Windsor's budget, or is everybody making at least $15 an hour?
I can speak to the general government side. We have approximately $30,000 reflected within the town side of the operating budget in anticipation of the minimum wage increase. But also, as Dr. Cooke mentioned earlier, we are in a very tight labor market, and so we're finding it harder and harder to hire qualified part-time positions at that $12 and $13 an hour. We've been very successful using part-time folks over the years, and what we're just finding in the last year to 18 months is becoming harder. The candidate pool is smaller, and the folks that have the skill sets that we're looking for oftentimes are not within that pool of candidates. So we're seeing an upward push regardless of 15-hour minimum wage or not.
All right, thank you. I think we're going to wrap it up unless we have anything else. Peter? Greg? All right. We have one more little question. Mary? All right.
I'd like to say hello to Peter. I want to ask him a question for a minute. If you would take the microphone.
Absolutely.
I'd like to ask, in the town of Windsor, where the theater is, okay, they told me when I was walking down the green, they said, oh, you can't come in here because it's going to be a restaurant and a dinner theater. And I thought, oh, I don't know about that, but oh yeah, so you can't come in here. I said, okay, thank you. So that's all I did.
Yeah.
So what do we do about that? That's not what happened, right, Peter?
It hasn't happened yet. That's one of the ideas that they have. The owner would like to be able to put a restaurant with some type of entertainment venue in the where the old theater was. So we're crossing our fingers and hoping that it happens sooner rather than later.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. Let's give Peter and Craig a hand for coming.
Thank you.
And as a reminder, for people who are watching us, our next community budget forum is Wednesday, May 1st, 6:30 p.m. at Pequannock School. If you know of anyone who would like to come, we'll be there. And on behalf of the League of Women Voters and Windsor CT Votes, thank you for coming today. Have a good day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.